Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Kagabine at the Garland County Library, and today is National Voter Registration Day. Got my sticker right here. So in recognition of that, I'm here this evening with Gene Haley. He's the chairman of the Garland County Election Commission, and he's actually on the other side of the room from me, way on the other side of the auditorium. So hello over there, Gene.
Hi.
And you can tell he's got the good webcam. Mine's all blurry and bright, but that's okay. So he's here tonight to tell you everything you might want to know about voting and registration here in Garland County. And if you have any questions for him, please ask them in the comments. And as soon as he's done presenting, I'll be sure to ask them for you. So one more thing before we get started, the library is a voting location on Election Day. That's Tuesday, November 3rd from 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. So if you're voting in person, you're welcome to come here and do it. So as long as you're a registered voter in Garland County, you can vote at any polling location in Garland County. And we'll have the auditorium properly and safely socially distanced and have a separate entrance and exit and all that. So anyway, Mr. Haley, I'll let you take over from here, and I'll see you guys in a little while.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Again, my name is Gene Haley. I'm chairman of the Garland County Election Commission. In Arkansas, the first step, of course, to voting is to register to vote. Now, if you're a new voter or you move from out of state, it has to happen 30 days prior to the election. Well, the election is November 3rd, so that would be October the 4th, which happens to be a Sunday. So therefore, you get an extra day. October the 5th is the last day for a new registration or a registration from outside of Arkansas. If you are registered in another county and you move to Garland County, you can do that up to 4 days prior to the election. So we're early voting 13 days prior to the election, not counting Sundays. So you can actually go to early voting and move your registration from, say, Saline County to Garland County. That is legal. If you moved within Garland County, we need to change your address to make sure you get the correct ballot, because maybe you're in one city director district or another, or a JP district, or even a state representative district. And we need to make sure you get the correct ballot. So you should check your voter registration now. It's easy to do. You go to garlandcountyvote.org. Right on the front page, it will say, check my voter registration and print my sample ballot. So if your name shows up, you have to put in your name, first name, last name, and your date of birth. If you do that and your name shows up, that means you are registered to vote. Check the address. If that's correct, you don't have to do anything else. But you can scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. It'll list all the different polling locations that are open, but all the way down to the bottom of the page, and you will see a sample ballot. There are 40 different ballots in Garland County, so we have to make sure you get the right one. So that's why the address is so important. If your address is wrong, please try to get that changed prior to going to the polls. We can change it at the polls. It just delays a little longer. Print out that sample ballot. I do it for my wife. We print it out. She marks what she wants. She takes it to the poll with her. It takes her 3 minutes to cast her ballot because she's already decided who and what she wants to vote for. That's what I suggest for everybody is go ahead and print out your ballot, and you can take it with you to the polls. You just can't flash it around and show it to people, but you can take it to the polls with you and use it as a guide. But that's garlandcountyvote.org. And right on the front page, it will tell you how to check your registration and print your sample ballot. It'll also tell you the different ways there are to vote. There's several different options. One is you're allowed to vote by absentee, which is in some states they call it a mail-in ballot, but typically they are mailed in. In Arkansas, the law is a little different than other states. The first thing you have to do is you have to apply for a ballot. Now, COVID-19 is an authorized excuse for an absentee ballot. But in Arkansas, we've never really denied anybody. If you say that you're unable to attend the polls on Election Day and you request a ballot in a timely manner, the county clerk will send you a ballot. You mark it, you send it back in, and your vote will count if the paperwork is correct. The other way to vote is early voting. There's 13 days of early voting. That's Monday through Friday, starting on October 19th. Monday through Friday, 8 to 6. at 7 different locations, and on Saturday at the same locations, 10 to 4. That's for 2 weeks. And then the very last Monday, which would be November 2nd, the day before the election, state law says we have to close at 5 o'clock. So we're only open to 5 that last day. But all 7 locations, and again, garlandcountyvote.org, and you can see a list of those locations. One of the locations is the convention center, 14,000 square feet. So we can put a lot of people in there. We can socially distance. We'll probably have 15 machines, voting machines in there. We can handle a lot of people in that location. And again, go in one entrance and out another entrance. We will have masks and for our poll workers, we'll have splatter screens, face shields, and all the sanitizing things to sanitize between the voters. I haven't seen them yet, but the Secretary of State has promised us disposable stylus where we can hand somebody a stylus to sign the tablet or to mark their ballot, and they can take it with them, throw it away, do whatever. We don't have to sanitize that or get it ready for another voter. It's completely disposable, and that is our goal, and I hope it works. As soon as we get them, we'll test them and make sure they do work. And the last way you can vote is on Election Day. There'll be 16 locations, the same 7 that are early voting locations, plus 9 others. Polls are open on Election Day from 7:30 to 7:30, and here at the library is one of the locations. And this is a easy facility to find, an easy facility to come in and socially distance. And like Paul said, we'll be able to come in one door and out the other. We will sanitize the equipment between voters. It will be perfectly safe, in my opinion, to vote in person, either early voting or Election Day. The 7 locations for early voting, besides the convention center, we've got a new location inside Hot Springs Village for the first time at the Unitarian Universalist Church on Barcelona. We've never had one inside the village, but we thought it would help in this election to do that. We've also got one out west at Royal First Baptist Church, which we've never had. So there's plenty of opportunity to vote. If you take, even though we closed some locations, if you take all these early voting locations, 7 locations at 13 days, that's 91 voting days, where typically we would only have about half of that. So there's plenty of opportunity to early vote without having to worry about standing in a long line. We will attempt to socially distance inside the polls. We will attempt to try to control outside the polls. But if a husband and wife come together, we're not going to ask them to separate. We're going to let them stand together and vote together if that's what they choose to do. The mail-in vote or absentee voting is a process, and there's all kinds of stuff in the media and on TV and so forth about it, and a lot of it pertains to other states and not to Arkansas. In Arkansas, it's pretty simple, and it's an easy process if it's done correctly. What you have to do first is you have to apply for a ballot, and if you go to our website, to garlandcountyvote.org, you'll see an absentee ballot application, a little logo. If you click on it, I've got one on it that says COVID-19. You just mark it and you're done. You have to sign this application, make sure the address you want the ballot sent to is correct, and your date of birth is on there. The county clerk will mail you a ballot. We've mailed out about 3,500 so far. What that means is our biggest election year was 2016, and we only had 1,200 the whole voting season. So this is already about 3 times our biggest absentee voting event. So you fill out the application, the county clerk will mail you a packet, and it's quite extensive. The packet involves 3 envelopes. You're going to receive an envelope from the county clerk, and it's going to look like this, and it'll have your name and a little sticker on it right here. That's going to have everything in it that you need. Inside that envelope is a return envelope, and this will have your return address up here, your return address right here, for you to mail everything back to the county clerk. What goes in here, it tells you on the back exactly what to put in here. It says put a ballot only envelope. We have an envelope that just says ballot only. Inside that envelope, you will put your ballot. This is a ballot I'm just using as a sample. That's why it says rejected on it. It's not a live ballot. So you'll put that ballot in this envelope and seal it up. There's nothing on here that says who you are or whose ballot this is, so we don't know. This goes in the return envelope along with what's called a voter statement. And the voter statement is just a sheet that says basically you swear that this is who you are, and you sign this and put the same information you put on the original application. What we have to do is we have to compare, compare this to the original application for the signature. The way you signed it on the application should be the way you signed it here. Now, if you signed the original application, William Jones, and you forgot and you signed this one, Bill Jones, that's close enough. If the Jones looks similar, we're going to take it. If there's a way for us to count this ballot, we are going to count it. The mistake people make is where it says voter signature, they do not sign it. And if the law says if it's not signed on this line right here, we cannot take it. So that's why that is important. So you take this, you take the envelope that says ballot only, and you take a copy of your photo ID. Now, photo ID has to be issued by the state of Arkansas, the federal government, or a secondary education institution inside the state of Arkansas. So typically that's a driver's license. It can be a passport, a military ID, a concealed carry permit. There's a whole list, again, garlandcountyvote.org, and you can see a list of those. And it's also on the back of the voter statement, along with instructions exactly how to fill out this. And you can copy this from the website too. All these instructions are there. All this goes in a return envelope and gets mailed back to the county clerk. Now, it costs about $1.20 for us to mail this out to you because it's an oversized envelope. It'll cost you 2 stamps to mail this back to the county clerk. If you don't want to do that, you can take it to the county clerk, and there's a drop box in her office. You take it in and drop it in that box, and it's the same as mailing it to us. When 2 weeks before the election, we will start looking at these, and we'll look at the signatures, and if the signature and all the information on this voter statement matches your original application, we will make a decision right there. We are going to count this ballot. So now we've got a ballot in this ballot only envelope. It's sealed up. We don't know who it belongs to. It goes in a ballot box. And on election day, we will open all these and run them through our scanner just like you were voting in person. So the whole system works exactly like voting in person if you do the paperwork right. That is the key to this whole process, to make sure it works. So we can legally count a ballot if the paperwork is correct. Now, because of all the talk about the post office and fraud in absentee ballots, fraud's really not something I worry about in Garland County. One, because all this double check where we have to check against the original application. So in Arkansas, I don't really think that's much of a problem, but we can't control the post office, so we don't know what's going to happen there. We mailed over 3,000 ballots last Friday, and people have already sent them back in. So we know that at least they are getting, and they're giving us a priority. But if you ask for an absentee ballot and then you change your mind, you get worried about it, and I assure you there's nothing to worry about. But if you get worried about it, don't try to change it. You've already made a plan, and let's stick with it, because then we're assured your vote's going to count on election day. If you decide, I don't want to send this back in, I want to go vote in person, that's your right. But because we have to investigate every single instance where something is different, that vote won't count on election day. It will count If it deserves to be counted, it'll be counted sometime within the next 10 days, say after the election. But if you want your vote to count on election day and you ask for an absentee ballot, please just complete it, send it in, or take it to the clerk's office and let us process it. I know that will work. I think that's about all I have right now, Paul. If you have some questions.
All right. Well, thank you. That was very informative, and I hope it addresses most of everything people might be concerned about. But I'm sure it's been a very challenging year for anyone setting up an election. What has your team at the Election Commission personally had to do to adapt here at a local level?
Yes, it has definitely been a difficult year. First, excuse me. First, we had to deal with all the information out there about the pandemic and people's concern about whether it was safe to vote in person or not. Not just for voters, but for our poll workers. We had about 25% of our poll workers choose not to work this election, which is fine. We typically have about 200 poll workers for election this size. So we wind up with about 130 of our existing poll workers that are willing to work, which is great. So we put the word out early that in every county in Arkansas has had this, every county probably in the country's had this problem of having enough poll workers. We put the word out of different organizations and some media outlets, and we got a bunch of new applications. So we have about 90 new poll workers that we are processing right now and training. And we had to stop at that because that should be enough. But we've also got a list of 50 or 60 more that we just are adding to a list just in case something happens. Now, because of this pandemic, the election is, and I tell my poll workers that the biggest answer to every question is we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen on election day. If something flares up and we have to close the location, we're just going to have to deal with it. And that's what we're not used to. Usually we make our plans, it runs smooth, we have an election, we have results. There's been a lot of talk about results, whether we were going to be able to do that on election night. And I myself have said, I don't know this is going to happen or not because there's too many unknowns. I feel a lot more confident today than I did a month ago about that we will have some good results on election night.
Thank you. Can you go over again where people can check online to make sure they are in fact registered and what the deadline is to register?
GarlandCountyVote.org. That's the Election Commission's website. And what I've done now on the very front page, I've put little buttons to make it easy. The first button says check my voter registration and print my sample ballot. So that's the first step. If you find out, if you put your name and your address, which is what it takes, and this is the Secretary of State's website, it's not ours. So you go to it basically links you to their website. You put in your first name, last name, date of birth, and it should pop up with your correct address. If that happens, everything is fine. If it doesn't happen and you believe you should be registered to vote, call the county clerk's office. That phone number is also on our website, but it's 622-3616, and they can check for you. The deadline for, if you're not registered, the deadline to register to vote is October the 5th this year. That is if you're not registered or you're from out of state. In state, if you're just moving from county to county, it's only 4 days before the election, so you have plenty of time for that.
Thank you. If someone were to miss the deadline, is there any recourse or exceptions for that?
It's state law. There's really nothing you can do. If somebody shows up to vote and we show they're not registered to vote, but they think they are, we're going to allow them to vote what's called a provisional ballot. And what happens is it's kind of the same process as absentee, where the ballot winds up in one of these ballot-only envelopes, but it's held out of our scanner until we can investigate it. And basically, we have to investigate each one of them, and the 3-member election commission has to vote on every single one to count it or don't count it. So somebody says they registered at the DMV, which is typically had some problems, and they say they registered at the DMV and they think they should be able to vote. We're going to allow them to vote, and then we're going to go look at the DMV records from when their driver's license was issued and see if they marked they wanted to register to vote. And then we will count that vote. What happens at the DMV is they ask you if you want to be registered to vote, and you say yes, and they check a little box. But if they don't put the county down at the bottom, the county doesn't get a response from them to say this person registered to vote. So if that happens, we have a way to fix that, and that's what we do. But it takes a little time, and again, it'll be after the fact, but that vote will count if we can prove that they did register.
If someone shows up to vote, you did say if you had to, you could update their address at the door, correct? What surprises might happen at the door that could prevent someone from voting entirely?
Nothing. In other words, if somebody wants to vote, we're going to let them vote. There's really two types of vote. There's what we call a regular ballot, which means you come in, you sign our poll book, we hand you a ballot, you mark it, and you put it in a scanner. You know that vote counted. The other way is we're not sure, but you think you deserve the right to vote, we're going to let you vote. It's going to be this provisional process where we keep it in a separate envelope, we notate all the issues, and we investigate it. And if we can legally count it, we will count it. So we had in 2016, we had one person came in and said the last time they voted was for Jimmy Carter. So that does happen. If you don't vote in 2 federal elections, you'll be removed from the polls. But that's a county clerk function. County clerk does voter registration. The election commission operates elections.
What is the doesn't someone that's turning 18, if they what is the deal with that? What is their time frame there to work with on getting registered?
Okay, as long as they're 18 on election day, they can vote. They can register at 17 and a half roughly, or if they're going to be 18 by November 3rd, they should register now. We've gone to the high schools and registered tons of high school seniors because that's what we do. We try to help anybody that wants to vote. So if they send in an application and their birthday is November 2nd, well, they can't go vote on November 1st because they have to wait until they're 18. But we will accept that as a valid pre-registration, if you want to call it that.
Let's see. What are some common myths and misconceptions that people have about voting that you might be able to debunk?
Well, besides people worried about fraud, which again doesn't concern me because I've done this for 22 years in Arkansas, there's always a fear of somebody hacking into our system. Now, our voting equipment is not connected to the internet or to anything. And every vote that's ever placed in Garland County is sitting in my office now. So when we certify an election, if we say this location had 540 votes, we should have 540 ballots in my office. So all elections in Arkansas are local like that. Now, we transmit to the Secretary of State, and that's what you see on the TV at night, scrolling over the TV screen, but that's not necessary. That is not the actual results. The actual results always occur 10 to 15 days after the election. That's when the Election Commission certifies the count. We certify that we've checked every ballot. We voted on where to count any of these odd ballots that we're unsure of. And we've decided, and if we decide on one of these odd ballots that we don't count it, we send that voter a letter, and we typically have a hearing where they can come and present their case to us 10 days after the election. And we have reversed some of our decisions because they've been able to prove to us that in one case they weren't a felon, in another case somebody else signed for them, and we could tell that wasn't their signature. Once we do that research and investigation, we're going to count every single vote that we can count. And there is no way to hack into our system because all these ballots from the primary this year from back in March are sitting in my office right now. I can go and pick up the ballots that were cast here in the library in March and count them and verify that they were exactly what we reported.
Yeah, we got a printout of just the vote count from that. I mean, of course, it doesn't have any information from the voters on there, but it was so long. It was as tall as I was. So that was quite a success. So I'm glad we're partnering with you on that.
Well, in Garland County, there's 62,000 registered voters. In 2016 presidential, which was one of our busiest presidential elections, we had about 42,000, or roughly a little over 60% of the registered voters vote, which means about 20,000 people didn't vote. Now, are those 20,000 people that registered at the DMV and never vote, or we don't know? But roughly 60% turnout is what we expect in this election.
This may not necessarily affect our community much, but it probably will in the future with National Park College expanding. What do students from different areas who are going to school here need to know to vote?
Well, actually, a student has a choice. They can vote in their home of record, which is where their parents live typically, or they can move their registration to where they're currently living. We had actually some from math and science school. We had Arkansas School for Math and Science and Arts. Is that what it's, anyway? We had a student there that wanted to be a poll worker, and we informed to be a poll worker in Garland County, you have to be registered in Garland County. So he moved his registration from Jonesboro to here and worked for us during the primary. He's since moved back to Jonesboro, and he moved it back up there. So because it's within the state of Arkansas, again, you can do that 4 days before the election.
Let's see. And is there any process for someone who is a felon to regain their rights to vote in Arkansas?
Well, that's a legal process. So basically, the judge or the courts have taken away their right to vote if they're convicted of a felony. If they're just charged with one, they can still vote. The process is to have that expunged is they have to basically pay their debts to society. They have to serve their time, serve their probation, pay their fines, do all that stuff. And then all they have to do is go back to the judge and ask the judge to restore their voting rights. And the judge will do that, and the county clerk will put them back on the rolls. Now, that's a lot of paperwork, and that's a problem for a lot of felons is get all this paperwork together. So typically you can go to the circuit clerk and you can get copies of some of the records if it happened in Arkansas. We had one felon from Mississippi, and he was having trouble getting his record restored because it was from Mississippi. And it took us a while, but we did get it fixed. So we helped him, and we'll help anybody do that kind of stuff.
All right. And then got one last question for you. And this one, you may not be able to answer directly, but is there any resource you would recommend for people to educate themselves on issues that may be on the ballot or local candidates, which can be difficult to research compared to, federal level?
Well, because I'm on the election commission, I can't really recommend anything because right. I don't want to push somebody in the wrong direction.
Sure.
The issues on the ballot, if you print out your sample ballot, you can read those issues. And because it's legalese, you have to try to decipher that stuff. Now, the University of Arkansas does have a website that kind of explains the issue part of it. As far as candidates, the ones that are belong to a political party, of course, they have their own version of what's good about their candidate, I guess is the way to put it. The nonpartisan candidates, which we've got a judicial race, which is a runoff race for circuit judge, and we've got the city director races, which are considered nonpartisan. So I don't know where you can find information on those people, except a lot of organizations like National Park College do have candidate forums where you can listen to them speak and try to evaluate the candidates.
All right. Well, that's all we have for this evening. Thank you, Gene. I'll let you have the final word. If you have anything else you'd like to say to the voters of our community, and just remind them one more time what the timeline looks like.
Well, the very first thing I can say to everybody is go vote. It does matter. It does count. In most cases, we've had very few races where there was one or two votes that mattered. It happens sometimes in city races, school board races. We had one JP race, just the peace race. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was 6 or 7 votes made a difference in that race. So every vote does matter, and if we can count that vote, we are going to count that vote. Now, you can order an absentee ballot now. We're mailing out, I think we had 250 applications yesterday, so we'll continue to mail those up until you can apply by mail for a absentee ballot. That means that the county clerk receives it in their office by mail 1 week before the election. You can take it in person up to the day prior to the elections. November 2nd, you can take it in person. The delivering the absentee ballots back to the county clerk, they have to be received in the mail by election day. So typically the mail runs around 1 o'clock on election day, and we get all of them. In the past, the post office has sometimes made a special delivery, and that's fine, that's legal. If you want to drop it off in person, it has to be dropped off the day prior to the election. So November 2nd is the last day you can physically drop a ballot off without putting postage on there. Early voting starts October 19th at 7 locations. Election, the hours are 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, and 10 to 4 on Saturdays at all 7 locations. A list of those locations, go to garlandcountyvote.org for that and all this other information. Election day, the polls are open 7:30 to 7:30 at 16 locations. On election night, we typically get the results back in around 8:30, say. Typically by 9 or 9:15, we will have totals of what happened on election day. Depending on the volume of absentee ballots, we hope we have that total too. So the only difference between that result and the result we certify 10 days later are all these ballots that we have to investigate and come up with a solution for.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you for coming in, and we love working with you and hope to work with you and host elections to come, many elections to come. Thank you everyone for watching, and this video will be posted for you to refer to at any point leading up to registration deadline and the voting deadlines. And be sure to share this information with all your friends and anyone who is registered or needs to be registered to vote here in Garland County. So thank you, and have a good evening.